Generally speaking, the occult is defined as belief in or practice of anything supernatural or mystical. Over the years, that has become equated with sort of satanic or voodoo in some cases, but certainly the practice of what you might call black magic or black mass. And that's really not what it is. Again, that's the popular sort of interpretation of the word, and is why, again, that's sort of the popular interpretation of the term occult, and is again how it became synonymous with these largely fictitious crimes and conspiracies during the 70s and 80s, and again now today. But really, it's a very broad definition, and then you have to ask yourself who and what practices then would be included in that. Is fortune telling, for instance, an occult practice? Is tarot reading an occult practice? Technically, yes. And in fact, still on the books in terms of criminal law in Canada is an offense known as pretending to practice witchcraft, which is defined as anyone who takes magic or fortune telling or tarot readings and purports it to be anything but an exercise in fun, purports it to be real, purports to have actual clairvoyance, and takes money for it. That is deemed witchcraft in criminal law. So then ask yourself, if that person is pretending to be a witch, what else is technically part of the occult? Much of what we understand to have been, what we now recognize as the Satanic Panic, this obsession with all things occult during the 1980s. This really began with a 1980 memoir called Michelle Remembers, which was written by a now disgraced Canadian psychiatrist who insisted that he had recovered memories from one of his patients, indicating that she had been sold into a satanic sex cult as a child. And this is where this idea that these cults were omnipresent, existing everywhere, and that Satanism was operating behind the scenes in every local town really took hold. And this is reflected in the music, the television productions, and the films of this era, either critiquing this, looking to expose this, or reflecting the fact that everyone was paranoid about this. Devil music. Cut it there. That was long anyway.
Yeah.
So I'll talk about Jeanette De Palma. I just got to get that.
Sure.
Going back even before the 1980 book Michelle Remembers, the 1972 murder of Jeanette De Palma in New Jersey, her body being found on a cliff that was known as the Devil's Teeth. Already these thoughts that the occult were responsible and satanic cults were responsible for a great number, a disproportionate number of violent felonies in the US really took hold here, where that paranoia and the fact that her body by coincidence is found on a landscape known as the Devil's Teeth really framed the interpretation of the evidence in that case. Some randomly strewn items left over from a previous Bush party were thought to have been assembled in such a way that they represented an inverted cross. Other, again, random items, including natural items in the existing landscape, were interpreted as having some symbology. And very quickly, the theory was that this was a ritual murder, specifically a satanic or occult ritual homicide. From there, this idea really picks up momentum. And then we get to 1980, and we have the first official documented case of recovered memories of a victim of occult or satanic child sex abuse. From a criminological perspective and an investigative perspective, this is really unfortunate that this narrative becomes the lens through which these crimes, which are real crimes in many cases, the exploitation and trafficking of children and young girls, that this occult narrative obfuscates the reality that human trafficking has been a major problem for years. And only now do we really have the nomenclature, like human trafficking, to identify it and to properly investigate it. For years, it was really relegated as being this, again, black mass occult ritual practice, sort of as a predecessor to what we now understand to be the QAnon or Pizzagate conspiracies. For many years, this practice was misinterpreted, and as a result, I believe, not properly documented or investigated or taken seriously with the rigor that it should have been. Instead, it was fodder for speculation, conjecture, and film and television stories.
Yeah. Okay.
Good?
Yeah.
Growing up, my grandparents lived in what I call the mother of all creepy country houses, a 3-story 19th century farmhouse in the middle of nowhere that was reputedly haunted. The first owner burned to death after a gas lantern fell to the ground in the front parlor. And various guests, including members of my family for years, said that they saw or heard things indicative of the fact that this spirit still inhabited this place. And if you saw this place from the road, it would make sense. It looked like a haunted house. Over the course of my career, I conducted hundreds of investigations, and one of the thousands, in fact, and one of the lingering questions I had was, and investigations I wanted to undertake, was with respect to can we quantify or say with a certain degree of investigative verisimilitude, as we say, that ghosts are more likely than not. So on the evidentiary balance of probabilities, are they more likely than not, or 51%, to arguably exist? So I undertook an investigation and traveled to Ireland, which is, again, reportedly one of the most haunted countries on earth, or at least according to anecdotal reports, and stayed at a series of haunted properties, allegedly, over the course of about a week and a half.
Sorry, pause.
So over the course of about a week and a half, I stayed at multiple haunted properties, again, allegedly haunted, reported sightings and supernatural occurrences or phenomena. And despite my best efforts and having the most open mind, I neither saw nor heard anything that would support that these places were anything but just old, charming properties to spend the night. Nothing, even going exploring in the middle of the night outside the properties, areas to which guests are not normally afforded access. I saw nothing, and maybe that was just timing, but I returned back with the understanding and having come to the conclusion that ghosts do not exist, which then fundamentally raises new questions with respect to mortality and spirituality, and leads me to question other things now as well. I think people want ghosts to exist because it, again, opens up that realm of possibility that death is not final. If ghosts can exist, then there's an afterlife. And if there's an afterlife, then there's a whole series sort of corollary beliefs that you're going to have along with that, including in some kind of God. So coming to the understanding that ghosts don't exist, that doesn't mean they can't exist. Certainly means that having gone to the most reputedly haunted places, certainly in the Western world, there is no evidence to support this, raises issues of faith. So all of the properties in question at some point functioned as castles of some kind. These weren't just simply dwellings. These were places where a number of people lived. There were servants, there were staff, and in one case there was what's known as an oubliette, which is essentially like right out of the movies, a pit, not bottomless, but for all intents and purposes bottomless, where people were thrown down the equivalent of dozens of stories into a pit to die. and it's believed that this property had upwards of 1,000 people thrown into this pit in the Middle Ages. Again, there is something unsettling. You can feel just the negative energy in the place, and maybe to some people that's a haunting, but nothing to suggest that these people still inhabited the property or were able to exert any sort of physical effect in terms of generating noise, in terms of moving objects, in terms of having any interaction, tactile interaction with the inhabitants. None of that.